The Help Myself podcast, brought to you by Q Images, run by Timothy Quisenberry. It's a world-class, veteran-owned and operated Las Vegas-based photography company. Whether you need on-site, in-studio, or on-location photography, be prepared to receive top-notch, innovative, and high-level professionalism from Q Images. While other photographers take photos, Q Images captures memories and creates experiences. Go to qimages.smugmug.com or Instagram at QUE_images. Also, the book Powered by Purpose, written by none other than your host, John M. Singletary Sr. Get your copy today at thehelpmyselfpodcast.com. Welcome to the Help Myself podcast. I am your host, John M. Singletary Sr., and I've got to put that senior in the front because I've got a junior, John M. Singletary Jr., aka LJ. And you know that's who I do it for. That's my co-pilot and my co-host, not only in the show, but in this thing that we call life. And so I definitely have to send a shout out to that. You've tuned in to the most dangerous podcast in the land. And why do we call it that? That's because we're taking the power and putting it back where it belongs. That is in the hands of the people, and the people are you. So welcome back to another episode of the Help Myself podcast. All through the month of May, I've been using a masterclass format. I'm very inspired by what my brother Derek Jones is doing with the Relationship Gumbo platform. And he's over there turning up the numbers, but more importantly, positively impacting lives over on TikTok. So make sure you go check him out. It's at Relationship Gumbo at TikTok, or you can go to his website and get connected to his community at the Love Academy. So we'll be definitely sharing more information, and we definitely plan to have him back on the Help Myself podcast soon for season 4, so we can chop it up and talk about what he's been up to since the last time we talked. So I'm proud of that. Obviously, as you heard in the intro, support Q's Images, and I'm excited. Again, I told y'all we're going to be doing some work during the summer, and y'all gonna see some live stuff, man. And shout out to my guy that's keeping me fresh, Cisco Photography out here in the DC area. He's dope. He's dope, and obviously I get great responses from my pictures. So, part of that is on me because I'm such a fly subject. So, sometimes you just can't help to take good pictures when you have an inspiring subject to take pictures of. So definitely, but not only that, I also want to encourage you, if you have not grabbed a copy of this book, listen, it's a great book. The reviews are great. I appreciate all of the support. But this isn't about just supporting me. And, I make this joke all the time. Like, it would be irresponsible to me to be trying to push or coerce someone that isn't much of a book reader, be like, hey, you need to get my book. And they're like, hey, I'm not really into books like that. But if you are a book reader, but more importantly, if you are into personal development, building yourself up, getting actualized tools to make yourself better in whatever your discipline may be, this book right here will not disappoint. So make sure you go grab a copy of that on my website. That is www.thehelpmyselfpodcast.com. And that's all of the socials there at the bottom of the screen. You can catch me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I'm in and out of TikTok, so, but follow me, go to the website, sign up for the mailing list, go to the YouTube page, go to my YouTube page, which is the Help Myself Network. Click the link, subscribe, like, share. We've got a great podcast that's going on right now called They Jammin', myself and my buddy Rock, man, and we get to chit-chatting and share some of the dopest music that you may have heard and a lot you probably never have heard, but it's a really good time, great conversations, but a lot of music that you can add to your playlist. That is exclusively on Spotify in the audio format. And you know, we here at the Help Myself podcast, we're still doing the video on YouTube and Facebook. Then select episodes also premiere on LinkedIn, but you can still catch the audio, whether it be Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you get your audio podcast. Make sure that you tune in to the Help Myself podcast and get that development. And so since we're talking about development, I want to talk about improving organizational culture by varying your meetings. And I know the title says varying meetings, but by varying your meetings. I want to give you some tools because obviously meetings aren't fun, or they're not always fun. They're not synonymous with fun. A lot of times there's a, I wanted to add it to, but I wasn't able to download it. But I wanted to add, there's a tweet that says this meeting could have been an email. I know a lot of us, I used to feel the same way. Like we used to have a weekly status meeting and it seemed like it was just same meeting, different day, week in, week out. And when we would get that email or somebody would say, hey, we're not going to do a meeting today, we would be so excited because it was like, oh, now I don't have to go on here and waste my time on another meeting. But it is important. Let me tell you something. When you're building organizational culture, meetings will definitely help you build that. And I'll tell you why it's important to have meetings. So it's important to get in front of your people, to get with your people, so that they can check in, they can talk about some things, so you can put some things on their minds, so we can do some temperature checks to make sure people are okay. Sometimes in a meeting, you'll find out that somebody is going through something. And then, the meeting will give you an opportunity to talk to them and, to address some of those things. Sometimes putting people in the same space will allow people to be exposed to questions, ideas, and thoughts that they might not have been exposed to or they might not have thought. How many times have you been in a public setting and somebody asked a question that you wanted to know the answer to, but you didn't have it on your list? You didn't even think to ask that question, but they asked that question. You're like, man, that's a good question right there. And so there is a lot to be said for the value of meetings, but when you do not use meetings in a correct way, you watch your organizational culture start to dissipate. And listen, when I talk about meetings, I'm not just talking about in, at your job or, corporate or anything like that. I'm talking about meetings, whether it be for, your personal organizations, be for small teams. It could be for a bunch of friends planning a girls or a guys trip, you planning events. Meetings will help you with these cultures. As a matter of fact, tonight we have a meeting of this sort with gentlemen that I produce a podcast for, and I'm a member of this team. And we're having a meeting to see if there's some things that we can clean up, that we can do better, that we can add to the show to make it better, because a lot of times these changes can't be made on the fly. There's a lot to be said to the ability to make those changes on the fly. But a lot of times with the meeting, you can instill things, you can share information, you can do some critiquing that you probably wouldn't want to do in live action. There's so many ways that you can prepare yourself to be able to go out and accomplish the task and build culture. So I'll go through a few of those. We'll talk about those and then we'll move on. But when we talk about meeting, There are three things that meetings do for you. The first thing that having meetings does is that it empowers you to be a consistent team, organization, or, group, right? So by having meetings, you have some consistency, because here's one topic that I talk about a lot: vision leaks. And what that means is that we might get together one day and give you the update, the direction that we want to go to, and have a good feeling about everybody taking in the information, understanding the direction, and believing in where we're going. But as time goes on, people get caught up in their own personal cares. They got families, they got other interests, they got other responsibilities, they've got other things within that team or that organization or that culture that's pulling them this way and that way. And eventually, that meeting where you got up and you talked about the direction that we're going in, our purpose, why we're here, all of these things that people are excited about, that starts to slowly slip and fade from their memory as they are tasked to handle the things that are right in front of them. And so when you consistently meet, you're able to keep that vision, you're able to keep those timelines, those goals, and those specific things that have been accomplished according to the timeline and the set of goals, so that everybody remains on the same page. And a lot of times, if you're not meeting, it becomes similar to the whispering in somebody's ear and then having a phrase and then having them whisper it to the person next to them, and it goes all the way around the room. And by the time it gets to the last person, you have a totally different phrase or whatever that has been said. It's become morphed into something totally different, oftentimes opposing to what you originated with. And when you're not meeting and when you're not getting all the troops together, you lose that consistency and you lose that buy-in, because they start to fade away from the origin point that you started with. And so you meet to make sure people are on the same page. You meet to make sure that people are getting pertinent information that's happening in real time. You meet to make sure that there aren't any amazing ideas or some course corrections that need to be made, and people aren't having the opportunity to have these conversations. So it's important to meet. But not only do meetings give you consistency, they give you direction. Direction. So we meet, we talk about all the things that we want to do, all the things that we want to accomplish, all the things that we need to fix, whose job it is, all of these things, and then we move on. And again, with time, people are seeing a different version of the journey from where they are sitting. And you have to be able to compensate for that. If you are on a plane, you've got the pilots that are in the front of the plane, but some of the flight attendants are in the middle and in the back. And that experience for each member, even though we're on the same plane, is different. And so sometimes you just need to have a huddle, you need to get together so that you can continue to be on the same page, because although you're on the same team, you're riding the same wave, you're experiencing it at different points in different locations in your organization or on your team. And a lot of times, based on your perspective, you're seeing different things. So for instance, I'm a big picture guy. I'm a creative. So I'm seeing, hey, are we getting our customer service right? Is the impact, do we look the part? But there might be somebody that's more into the tactical and the technical, saying, hey, we're not meeting each staggered benchmark correctly. Like sometimes we're here, sometimes we're there, and we're not progressing in the right ways. And I'm like, well, as long as the outside product looks good, and they're like, well, if you don't keep this part going well, eventually the outside product is going to be a mess. So that direction, you got to get together and kind of tighten all that up. But not only consistency and direction, but purpose. And again, this is one of those things where when you're a part of something bigger than yourself, which I think is vital and important, not only to us as members, but just as a human race, it's important to believe in and be a part of and invest in something bigger than you. But when you are a part of something and it is bigger than you, sometimes that purpose can get ambiguous as you are tunnel vision focused into your daily part that you're doing. So let's say in a marriage, some of the best marriages that I've had to the what do we call it? The privilege to be a part, well, not a part of, but to be engaged with these people, to have relationships and friendships, and to be in their presence. And some of these best marriages meant that they meet often to talk about these things. They don't just assume that because we're married and because we're love each other, we're in love and we've got a similar goal, that everything is going well. They get together to remember why. One of the things that they talk about is that when you get in the struggle, you forget that you're a team, and it's not to fight against each other, but it's to fight against the things that are coming against you as a team. And sometimes there are so many ways that they talk about to have couples to reconnect, to have families reconnect, and remember the purpose of why you joined. Because again, so many times we get far away from the original reason because of life, because of circumstance, because of situations, because of distractions, struggles. Look, it doesn't have to even be all bad stuff. Sometimes celebrations and great things happening cause us to lose focus and cause us to kind of remember why. You jump on a podcast and you get a bunch of people together, it's a couple of ladies together, a couple of fellas, or it's a group, and you start to get outstanding reviews. Sometimes that can go to your head and you forget that we need to get back to the basics and stay centered to remember why we're here, what we're here to do, whose job is it to do what. Maybe somebody's outgrown a position. Maybe somebody has shrunk under the light of the position, and we need to reorganize how we're doing, reorganize the tasks and what needs to be done. So we have to get together and remember our purpose and make those changes based on that. So those are three big reasons why meetings are important and how you can utilize those meetings to improve your organizational culture. So now let's talk about the varied meetings. And these are John Singletary's terms for these. You won't find these in any book on leadership meetings or organizational meetings. But although I'm using terms personal to me, the way I describe meetings, as I describe these meetings, you will know exactly what meetings I'm talking about. And the first meeting are the tight meetings. Man, we know about the tight meetings. This is the meeting you ain't got no choice. It's a location you got to go to. There's a time when you have to be there, and there's a certain set of information that you either report on or do not report on, specific questions. Usually these are leadership directed or they're organizationally directed, and you get there in these meetings. Everybody has to come in within a certain space, a certain time, and meet certain metrics. And these are important because this is a space where, listen, if we are making the donuts, and most of you are probably too young to remember that reference, it's time to make the donuts. But when you're making the donuts, you got to make sure the ingredients are right. The person that's going to open the shop is there on time. The person that closes the shop, all of the moving pieces. So now we got to talk about donut factoids. We got to talk about, do we have enough of the ingredients to make the donuts that we need? Do we have the right amount of toppings? Do we have all the right coffees? Because donuts, man, the best thing to me to go with some donuts is some coffee. But younger folks, man, y'all might like it a little sweeter or whatever. But anyhow, I'm getting off topic with who likes what. But all of these things. So now this meeting is about specifics. How much money are we making off the donuts? Is there a surplus? Or are we in the hole? And do we have to do this? Do we have to adjust schedules? So this is a very specific meeting, and this is an important meeting. But here's where I would like to offer is that with tight meetings, you have to have them. But I would say do not make this the only way you meet, and don't make this a too often recurring meeting. So like I was telling you, our divisional meeting was once a week. Sometimes it was on Mondays. Sometimes we get a commander in there that say, I don't want to have it on Monday because sometimes Monday is a holiday. People are still getting their bearings from the weekend. We want to do it on Tuesday, which I always thought was a great idea because you have to do a lot of flexing with Mondays. But Tuesday, people have gotten into what we call a battle rhythm. And so you meet and people would get in there. And here's the one thing why and I'll get into it a little bit later, but with tight meetings, people go in there and it's an opportunity to get in front of leadership. And you get situations where sometimes people are putting on because this is their opportunity to be seen by movers and shakers and decision makers. And I understand that. But for us that just want this meeting to be over, we're sitting there being tortured by these awful and senseless repeats of information that could be an email, that could be pulled in a report. Well, we made 50 donuts on Monday and 75 donuts. Man, do we have to talk about this in a meeting? Can you just say we made 10% more donuts last week than this week or 7% less? Why do you have to detail the days and all that? And so sometimes that happens in tight meetings. Again, a tight meeting is usually organizationally or leadership oriented. And, people are in there. I've got to present my information so that I look like I'm contributing and that I have importance to this group, to this team, to this organization. So you understand that. And so while tight meetings are important, I would definitely say mix up the tempo and the pace of the meetings and do your tight meetings. They do need to happen often because a lot of times tight meetings are operational, but put as much time in between them as possible. So let's say in a month, you got 30 days, 31 days, February special with 28. But if you do a meeting every 9 to 10 days, now you're meeting 3 times a month. Maybe you have an organization that can meet twice a month. I've been in some organizations where we had leadership meetings 3 times a week. And while there was some important information, I was like, this is an hour and 15 minutes that we probably could have gave back to be more impactful. So I would always say it's important to have these meetings, but the easiest way to kill your organizational culture is to do overkill with your tight meetings because there are other meetings at your disposal that can continue to keep your organization effective. So let's talk about the next one. This is one that really came into view for me during COVID. Now, obviously, they talk about how they have this easy culture in Silicon Valley and how, at these different startups, they kind of have that laid back. But what I like to call is a loose meeting. And I'll describe that. This is a meeting where, yes, we need to meet at a certain time, but the place is not so specific. So there's room for some virtual, and when I'm thinking of these meetings, I'm thinking about times where I saw some of my coworkers, when they turn their camera on, they outside walking their dog. Or, my commander, at the time, his son was 3 years old. And his son would jump on our calls all the time. And, as somebody doing meetings, you're like, oh, I'm sorry about that. But we loved it because it brought some humanity to it. Because trust me, you listen to my podcast, you listen to any show I'm on, and whenever I'm doing meetings, LJ does not care anything about what's going on. Matter of fact, I'm not going to even say that. I'll say this. When LJ sees me talking to a camera, he gets interested and starts talking, and he wants to come and see what's going on. And to have these kind of meetings where it's loose and it's casual and people can be more in their own element. When people feel more comfortable and more in their own element, they feel freer to give information that can really push the culture and the organization forward. So if I feel like it's okay that my kid is running around making a lot of noise, or this is a time during the day, one of the things about loose meetings that was really helpful for my organization before I retired from the Air Force, my commander is Muslim. He's Orthodox Muslim. And during Ramadan, They had specific times that they had to do prayer. And so a lot of times, we run these meetings around this, and there's so many beautiful tenets of Ramadan. And me and him will talk about it all the time. It's like, yeah, there's some people in our lives and some games and, current events happening that we might want to speak negatively of, but during Ramadan, positive conversations. And I think definitely we always want to have positive conversations, but there's an increased focus. And, I want to make sure that I don't get too specific in it because I don't want to disrespect such a beautiful practice and such a beautiful religion. But so I would be like, here, I will take this part of it because we're having to deal with some heavy stuff. And I know that he was totally capable, but it was a beautiful opportunity to allow him to still be effective and then to recognize his religion and his spiritual beliefs and practices. And, somebody had to walk their dog. So, like this just allows people to do the different things. There was a guy that was walking on the treadmill during one of the meetings, man. And it was just funny because I'm wondering why his head was bobbing. And I'm like, say, man, are you in your basement? Like, yeah, man, I got to get these steps in. And, and the freedom, it wasn't an issue. And these loose meetings allow us to be creative. Now, obviously, some people, you give people a little slack. Some people going to go a little too far with it, get a little too loosey-goosey with it. But I like loose meetings because we're able to get information in there, but we're also able to create a culture where people feel like they can be more of themselves without reprimand of being just like everybody else. Because when everybody feels like they've got to be like everybody else, their ideas are just like everybody else, their input is just like everybody else, and all these things. So it's important to have that flexibility, and also, again, like I said, with the virtual aspect, this eliminates the need to be in a certain place, dressed a certain way. Obviously, you want to be respectful, but there's a lot of freedom there, and that is very helpful in your organizational culture. Another one that we ought to use, one-offs. There's nothing more frustrating to have an entire meeting for something that was probably designated for a smaller amount of people. And some meetings need to just be a one-on-one. So this is a part of your culture, when you're setting standards for how things will work in an organization for a specific person and how you want, when we do standards and expectations, that's a one-off meeting. We want to have a conversation. As a leader, I'm definitely more direct. I am less likely to I have used it and I will use it when I see fit to, but I'm less likely to use the grab everybody and talk about an issue that is specific to one or two people. I'm a lot more direct. If I see an issue that I need to talk to people, good or bad, I'm more so to talk directly to them. If it's a good thing that I want to share with the team, in another meeting, I will say, hey, I had this conversation with them and this, that, and the other, let them know or whatever. But one-offs, a lot of times we are putting groups together for information that could be shared in a much smaller. So utilize those one-offs so that information can flow, but it can get to the right people at the right time. And if it needs to be expanded, then you could expand later. But it's better to expand later than to have too big of a group. And then now people are getting deaded out to all the different meetings. And then a special interest meeting. This will be the final one. Sometimes things come up and you need to have a meeting that may be off schedule. It may not meet any of the other parameters. This is a totally different monster. But, and I called it a monster because obviously I'm not a huge fan of meetings, but I recognize how important and vital meetings are. And so a special interest meeting, this is one where there's a specific topic. This might not be for everybody to chip in. This might be for some information that just popped in. This might be that people need to have. And you have to be careful with a special interest meeting because if the information in the meeting could have been sent through an email, you're going to have grumpy teammates. But special interest, sometimes we got to meet because something happened out of the way. And a lot of times, a special interest meeting doesn't need to be, it doesn't have to be all the major players. It can be a smaller meeting or it can be the group, but sometimes this meeting might just be a flow of information from the top to the bottom or from leadership to the specific organizations. And so be careful with those meetings because, again, one-way communication does not always have to be verbal if it can be written. But sometimes you need to get in front of your people and share all of these different issues and situations and things that you need to talk about. Now, that is just a quick dive. Obviously, I tell you all the time. And one of my mantras that I used to use liberally during my time as a leader in the Air Force. If we're having a meeting and I'm presenting and y'all don't have a lot of input, I need to be able to get you out in 30 minutes or less. And so I'm watching this podcast go slightly over 30 minutes. But if there are any type of meeting or things like that you can add, I definitely want to share this on my page and kind of share the notes, because this is some information that I think is important for leaders, for organizations, for teams, for families. Listen, you can take what applies and let the rest of it fly, but it's important to use these to create great culture in an organization or a team by varying up your meetings. Listen, this was a nice meeting. Y'all met me whether you listened to me audio or you met me here on Facebook or YouTube Live, or you just tapped into the replay or LinkedIn. I want to thank all of you for rocking with the Help Myself podcast, man. The month of May, we've got some things planned for you. And then we're planning a break here in the summertime. We'll take a couple of weeks off. We're going to do some upgrades and redo some things and redesign. And we're going to come back shooting for the fences, man, but again, at the Help Myself podcast, it's always onwards and upwards. And we're definitely trying to do everything that we can, not only to bring you great topics to make your organization and your personal and professional life better, but to bring great guests with amazing stories of overcoming, of building amazing platforms, businesses, interests in all of these things, because I truly believe that you have the ability to do all of those amazing things that you dreamed of. Nobody has the dream. If you've ever, and I know this is mostly for my fellows, but there's some ladies out there that's some ballers. And if you're ever replaying the scene, it's the end of the game and you got the ball in your hand and you're about to shoot the game-winning shot. You don't ever pass the ball to somebody else, do you? No, it's always you shooting the game-winning shot and the crowd going crazy. And that right there is enough evidence to know that there's greatness inside of you and there's a desire to be great. And so let's continue to work together so that we can continue to cultivate that, continue to identify it, continue to call it out. Stop giving yourself all of these excuses to be less than what you were made and created to be, and continue to tap into your greatness. Continue to organize your thoughts in a way where you defend yourself against the lies that society, culture, and even your own life have told you. You are great. You are amazing. You are capable, and you absolutely deserve to live the best life possible. So with that thought, I'm going to close like I always do. Listen, I can't help myself. I've got to inspire. I've got to encourage. I've got to empower. But I can't help myself by being the absolute best version of myself. And guess what? You can too. So why not we do it together?